The CDL regular season is now over, which means there are 4 teams who will not play anymore this year and instead will turn their focus to the offseason and next year. One of those teams, of course, is the London Royal Ravens. Today we're going to play pretend for a day and pretend we are the London Royal Ravens general manager and see how we would build this team and sort of rebuild them as we approach the 2022 season. If you enjoy this kind of video, definitely leave a like down below because I plan to do a video like this for all 12 teams this offseason, so definitely let me know if you enjoy it. Leave a comment as well with your thoughts on the video and what you would do if you were in charge of rebuilding London for next season, and also subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one from me in the future as we approach the end of the CDL season and the off season. So I do appreciate all of that so very much, and let's hop right into the video. Before we look ahead to 2022, we have to first recap 2021 and see what went wrong for London, and there was a lot that went wrong. I think it's fair to say that there was ups and downs for them this year, but definitely more downs than ups, and what you see on screen definitely backs that up. They got 10th overall in the CDL this year. They were 9th heading into the last event, but Seattle was able to pass them with their miraculous run at the Stage 5 Major. Their series record of 9-23 was 10th best in the league as well. Their map or game win percentage of about 35% was actually 11th in the league, only ahead of the LA Gorillas, who we all know were a complete dumpster fire to end the year. So their standings were not great, their placements. Their individual mode records were not the best either. 19-32 in hardpoint is not terrible, but it obviously is not towards the top of the league. Search and Destroy 13-28, that is terrible. That I think is dead last in the league. I'm not 100% sure, but it is definitely towards or at the bottom. And then Control, they actually weren't too bad, and they were 13-19, but that's also only one map out of a 5-map series. So if there's one game mode you are really strong at, you don't want it to be Control because you don't play it as much. So overall, decent in one game mode, bad at the other 2 game modes, and overall just not good placements for them. Definitely not the year they wanted to have, and there are quite a few reasons for that. The biggest reason for London's struggles this year had to be the absolute madness they dealt with their roster throughout the season. They had 8 different players play for them at some point, and that does not include Zero, who was supposed to start the year as their flex AR player, so really that would have been 9 players who played for them. And there was just so many different ins and outs with this roster. So after Stage 1 or sometime during Stage 2, Alex took a break. He was replaced by Zaptius. Then after Zaptius' contract expired, he was replaced by Zed. Dylan got back in there at one point, and then Afro and Alex came back and replaced Dylan and Zed. Parasite, like I said, was also in there for Stage 1 in place of Zero. So there was all kinds of ins and outs and swaps with their roster, and it was very hard for them to build any kind of team chemistry throughout the entire year. But you will notice a theme with this roster. There was one of 2 themes. Pretty much everybody they signed this year was either from the EU or they were a young up-and-comer, or in the case of Afro, both. The only exception to this rule is Parasite, and the reason for him, of course, is because he was a very late, last-minute replacement. He was not expected to be on the team, and he was pretty much just, they had no other choice. They had to get somebody in there for Zero, so they got Parasite. So beyond him, they clearly either stick to the EU guys, like Alex, Shawnee, Dylan, whoever else, or the young guys like Paul, Afro, Zaptius, or like, again, in the case of Afro, both. So that is definitely a theme we're going to follow as we look towards next year and we start to plan a roster. So as you look to next year, if I was the GM of the Ravens, I would absolutely, without a doubt, be building around Paul X and Afro. I would do whatever it takes to keep these guys in the lineup at all costs, because they proved to be very valuable pieces throughout this season. You see Paul X's numbers on the screen. You might think they're nothing crazy for an AR. Usually ARs have a little bit higher KD. And while that is true, he also had to deal with all those roster moves like I was talking about. He was in there. Him and Shawnee were just dealing with so many different pieces coming in and out. They could really never get adjusted. But Paul X still played very well. And these stats also came down towards the end of the year. There for a while, towards the middle of the season, he was playing very, very well. He was clearly the best player on this team and one of the best rookies in the league. And then Afro came around, and pretty much anybody who thought that Paul was the best rookie on London, he had to take a backseat because Afro came in and he just absolutely fried. His numbers across all the modes were phenomenal, especially for an SMG player. He's a very electric player. He plays very fast. He puts a ton of pressure on the map. He gets a lot of engagements. And as you see by his stats, he also wins a lot of those engagements. So pretty much when you're a sub player, you want them to do one of 2 things. Either have to get a lot of engagements, or if they don't get as many engagements, they have to win a lot of them. Afro was able to do both, and that's just awesome for the CDL as we move forward. We seem to be getting faster every year. There's always a faster pace being played. Guys like Vivid, Shotzi, Simp, Standy, you name them, Abizi, of course. They're all fast-paced players, and they make their living off of being fast and also getting a lot of kills. So Afro, he's just like those guys. Of course, he's younger and less proven, but the skill set is similar and the play style is very similar. So he's a piece I definitely want to build around if I was the London Royal Ravens GM. And then Paul X as well, because like I said, he was very solid throughout the entire year. And if you can get him in an environment where he does not have his teammates changing all the time, I think he'll be able to get more comfortable and produce even more as we head into the season. So if I was in charge of London, which we know I'm not, I would do whatever I can, and as much money as it would take, I would fork it over to be able to get Paul X and Afro on my roster for next season. The next thing I'd be looking for if I was building this team would be a SMG to pair alongside with Afro, and I would not be looking very far. I would be staying close to home. I'd be looking at Nasty from the EU Challenger scene, because this guy, I think it was without a doubt, he's the top EU prospect over in the Challenger scene. He's just a must-have. He does everything on the map. He plays very well. He's an awesome SMG player. We look at guys like Hydra or Afro, who came over this year from the EU Challenger scene as SMG players, and they performed very, very well. I think right there is the next one to do just the same thing. Nasty is just awesome. He's had so much success this year in the EU Challengers. He's won 7 out of 19 or 20 cups. He's also gotten second place 2 times. And then of the 5 EU Elite Championships, he won 2 of them and also got second place twice. So he is on a very good team. There's no doubt about that. So that definitely helped him. The whole entire Orgless organization, who they're now playing under the Atlas Lions, they've all been very, very good throughout the year. So his teammates also have pretty much as much success as he had, because they've been playing together all season long. But the talent is for sure there with Nasty. And it also fits in that trend I was saying about earlier, where London likes to either sign young guys or guys from the EU. Nasty's both. I mean, he's not technically young in like the pure age sense. I think he's 22, but he's young in the sense of his professional experience. We have not seen him in the CDL yet. He was a substitute last year for a brief period, but he's not been in the CDL, and he absolutely can be and should be there. And he might be cheap. I don't know. Maybe some teams from America will be trying to throw a lot of money at him this offseason, but he might want to stay with London. You know, he's probably familiar with Afro and some of his other potential teammates, so there's a lot of familiarity there. Him being on that EU side, he was London sub, like I said, last year for a little bit, so he's familiar with the org. There's a lot of upside here with this one. I would do anything I could, and hopefully it would not take too much money because of the salary cap and all that, but they shouldn't be approaching the salary cap yet, and I have to have Nasty in there at some point. I think him and Afro would form an absolutely awesome SMG duo. So all we have left is a main AR to round out this team, and I would look no farther than Zero. Of course, he was supposed to be on this team this year, but with his visa issues, we did not see him play at all in the CDL this season. But there's a lot of reasons that you could bring him in, and they all make sense. First of all, he's just a very talented main AR player. I mean, technically, he could play any role. He could be a flex AR, main AR, even an SMG, depending on how the roles work out in Vanguard. But in this case, he'd be the main AR, and he was most certainly be capable of that. He's just so talented. He's one of the most versatile players in Call of Duty history, and he's just so good. I mean, he's been good for a long time now. It was very unfortunate we did not get to see him at all this year, because I'm sure he would have done very well in this game. The team also needs a veteran presence. Paul X was a rookie this year. Afro was a rookie this year. Nasty would be a rookie next year if he was on the team. So there's really not that sort of leader and that in-game veteran who can do a lot of the communications and teamwork and hold the team together. And I think Zero would fit that role perfectly. They would definitely need leadership. We've seen the value of leadership from all the teams this year, and it's important to have, and Zero would definitely bring that. The one thing, or maybe two things, holding this idea back, though, could be bad blood with the organization, maybe. I don't know. It didn't seem like he left on the best terms this year. Like I said, he could not get to the States because of his visa issues, and he was eventually just released from the organization entirely, so I don't know if he'd be open to coming back. I don't know if the organization would want him back, but if they do and he wants to come back, it would make a lot of sense. Also, maybe money issues. When you think about London, they're not usually considered to be big spenders. They paid 8 different players this year, and I bet they still spent less money than teams like Optic or FaZe did on just 4 players. They're not known to be big spenders, so if Nasty comes with a high price tag, Afro and Paul might come with high price tags too, because all the other teams might want those guys. They would make a lot of teams in the CDL better. So if they're paying to get Nasty and paying to keep those other 2 rookies from this year, they might not have much money left. But if they do and they're willing to do it, I think a team of Zero, Nasty, Paul X, and Afro would make a lot of sense for London, and that's looking like a top 5 team in my opinion. So if they can get this team together, they would be very smart to do that. Now, if Zero wouldn't want to come back to London, or they would not be able to afford him, there are still some other good options for London out there. The first place you can look is just from the roster this year. You could take a look at Shawnee. He's not the highest ceiling player in the world, but he's also not have the lowest floor. He's just a consistent, he's reliable. He's a good AR player. You know what you're going to get from him. You know he can play the role well and play the game well. He's a smart player too. That would also work, like I was saying earlier with the whole youth movement thing. They wouldn't need that leadership role in there, and he can definitely bring that. He's also familiar with the organization. He's been with them for most of the year last year. I don't know if he was with them the entire year, but most of the year, and then of course the entire year this year. He's their only player this year who's appeared in every series for them this season, so he's very familiar with the organization. I'm sure he likes being there. I'm sure they like having him because he carries himself well. He's a good representation of the organization. And like I was saying, he has that veteran presence to bring to these young guys. So Shawnee makes sense, probably a little bit cheaper than Zero. Not as good as Zero. I mean, probably not. We don't know for sure because we didn't see Zero play pretty much this whole year. But he just makes sense. He fits the team well. He fits the mold of a Raven well. And he would make sense to see him on the roster next year. Or they could look somewhere else and continue their youth movement and go to the Atlas Lions like I was talking about earlier. 2 of Nasty's teammates, both Harry and Gizmo, would make sense as a man AR for London next year. They play in the same team right now. One of them's the man AR, one's the flex AR. I'm not sure which is which, but I know they're both very talented AR players, and both of them could probably switch over and run the man AR role, no problem. The potential here is obvious. I mean, very high upside. These guys are very talented. They probably have more upside than Shawnee. Of course, they could also have more downside than Shawnee. So it's a risk-reward type of scenario, but they've been successful all season long in challengers. They also have that chemistry already with Nasty, and it will not take long to build chemistry with Pollux and Afro because they are very easy players to play with. They're both very talented, very versatile, and can do pretty much whatever you ask of them, so it would not be hard to build chemistry with them. And then also they could just go full on youth movement. That would make sense also with London. When you think about it, you like to have that veteran presence, but there's two kind of tiers of veterans. There's guys like Crim6 and Scump who are just some of the greatest players of all time and who are still playing at a high level. Then there's also veterans like Slacked or Havoc or TJ Halley who have not had as much success this year on an individual level and are sort of being phased out of the league. So maybe it's better to get younger entirely and just build from the ground up and let these 4 players run together all next year, and if they play together, keep them for the future. So it works both ways. You want a veteran, but you don't want to have a veteran just because he's a veteran. You want to have him in there because he can also play Call of Duty very well. And if London feels Harry or Gizmo can play the role better than Shawnee or Zero or somebody else, by all means, they should not hold off on these guys because they're too young. If they want to get young, that is fine. The league it's becoming younger. The rookies are playing very well this year, and that trend will probably continue in the next year. So there's nothing wrong with getting younger. It would make a lot of sense. And a team of either Harry or Gizmo, along with Nasty, along with Paul X and Afro, would be a very good team. Young, and it would probably take them a little bit. They'd probably have some growing pains, but once they got together on the same page, they'd be a very strong team as we approach the Vanguard season. So that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed, definitely leave a like down below and leave a comment as well with your thoughts on the video and how you would build London as we approach next season. And also subscribe to the channel as well if you want to see more videos like this one from me in the future, because they will definitely be coming in the coming weeks and months. I appreciate all of that so very much. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you have a good day today, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.